The morning breaks with a force that feels almost electric, as if heaven itself leans close to whisper a warning. Wake up. Today the unseen world is shifting. Shadows move before the human eye can detect them. Strategies form in realms most never notice. And yet a call rises like thunder in the spirit. Holy Spirit, sharpen my discernment today. This is no ordinary prayer. It is a cry forged in urgency, birthed in expectation, and aimed straight into the heart of invisible battles waiting beyond the threshold of dawn. Before your feet touch the floor, the war has already begun, and heaven is ready to guide your every step. Jerusalem, Dawn Edition. As the first sliver of morning light cut across the horizon today, an unusual surge of spiritual awareness was reported among believers beginning their early prayers. Witnesses describe a moment as a holy stirring, a sudden clarity that arrived with the sunrise, alerting hearts and minds to a presence greater than the quiet of the morning. According to early reports, many individuals noted a near-instant shift the moment they opened their eyes, an internal call that urged them to pause, breathe, and intentionally invite the Holy Spirit into the unfolding day. This surge of expectation, described by one observer as an unmistakable spiritual nudge, set the tone for what some are calling a day of heightened discernment. Analysts familiar with spiritual patterns suggest that this early morning awakening signals more than routine devotion. It highlights a growing awareness of unseen battles believed to be intensifying beneath the surface of everyday life. Sources emphasize that such battles, though invisible, shape decisions, emotions, and the direction of personal paths. In response to this surge, believers nationwide have been engaging in early morning prayers with a renewed sense of urgency. Reports indicate that many began their day with bold declarations, inviting the Holy Spirit to sharpen intuition and strengthen inner resolve before stepping into unpredictable environments. Several early morning prayer participants have stated that the atmosphere felt charged, as though the day itself carried a divine assignment. This awakening has sparked conversations about being spiritually vigilant, choosing not to sleepwalk through the day but to rise with intentional clarity and heaven-led awareness. As the sun continues to rise, spiritual commentators predict that this morning's heightened alertness may signal a broader movement, one calling believers to step into their day fully awake, fully equipped, and fully aware of the battles they face. For now, the reports remain consistent. Dawn broke, and with it came a wave of supernatural alertness that many say they desperately needed. Jerusalem, morning update. In the hours following the unexpected surge of spiritual alertness at dawn, the atmosphere has dramatically intensified. What began as a quiet awakening has shifted into a wave of voices crying out for clarity, rising like a unified plea across households, prayer rooms, and quiet corners of the city. Eyewitnesses report that as the morning light grew stronger, so did the inner urgency among believers. Many who felt the initial stirring found themselves compelled to drop to their knees, recognizing that awareness alone was not enough. They needed divine clarity to navigate the unseen battles since earlier at sunrise. Information from various prayer gatherings indicates that this collective cry has taken on a raw, emotional tone. People are reported to be seeking breakthrough from confusion, deception, and spiritual noise that has been clouding judgment in recent days. One participant described a moment as a desperate reaching for truth in a world full of fog. Spiritual analysts observing the movement say the intensity marks a turning point. The awakening of Chapter 1 has now evolved into an intentional pursuit of sharper discernment. The community is no longer simply aware of the unseen conflict. It is responding to it with passionate urgency. Reports coming in suggest that the plea for clarity is not only emotional but strategic. Believers are asking for the Holy Spirit to expose motives, reveal hidden traps, and highlight the difference between divine direction and subtle distraction. The tone across prayer circles has been described as focused, almost warlike. The cries are said to rise with a force that seems to break through invisible barriers. People speak of feeling a weight lift from their minds as they ask for the Holy Spirit to filter out confusion and amplify truth. Some report sensing a sudden stillness. Others describe a burst of revelation, but all acknowledge a shift. Field reporters embedded in several early morning gatherings note that the momentum continues to grow. What began as personal whispers has become a collective declaration. Spirit of God, make it clear. The statement is echoed through numerous communities, becoming the unofficial anthem of the morning. Experts on spiritual dynamics are calling this moment unprecedented. They highlight that clarity in times of unseen warfare is not a luxury, but a necessity, and the people have realized it. The urgency stems from a recognition that decisions made today will have long-reaching consequences. As the movement spreads, some describe the environment as electrified, charged with expectancy. Hearts are open, ears are attentive, and souls stand ready for instruction. The cry is no longer just for information, but for revelation, an insight that cuts like a sword through every layer of confusion. The morning continues, and the cry for clarity grows louder. This second wave, directly connected to the awakening at dawn, signals that the people are not content to walk blindly. They seek truth, they seek direction, and above all, they seek the Holy Spirit to sharpen their discernment before the battles of the day unfold. Jerusalem, breaking mid-morning developments. Following the widespread cry for clarity that swept through prayer gatherings earlier today, events have taken a striking and unexpected turn. Reports are emerging of a sudden spiritual shift, one that many are describing as a piercing light uncovering what had long remained hidden. Witnesses across multiple regions recount moments of startling revelation. Individuals who have been pleading for Holy Spirit clarity began sensing that something was being unveiled around them. Hidden motives, unseen pressures, and deceptive influences now brought into sharp spiritual focus. It felt like the room itself changed. One participant reported, like a veil tore. Spiritual analysts confirm that such moments often follow intense cries for discernment. As clarity intensifies, shadows can no longer remain undisturbed. This phenomenon, observed throughout the morning, has led experts to declare this a pivotal stage in the unfolding movement that began at dawn. Multiple sources indicate that individuals started identifying internal battles they couldn't previously articulate. Sudden realizations about emotional drains, misleading voices, and subtle spiritual traps. One witness described it as the moment the enemy's fingerprints became visible. Correspondents stationed in several prayer centers report a growing awareness that certain patterns, once dismissed as coincidence or confusion, are now being recognized as targeted distractions. The Spirit-led revelations have prompted an atmosphere of bold confrontation, as believers face what had quietly worked against them. Reports continue to surge into people breaking ties with deceptive influences, unhealthy habits, draining relationships, and destructive thoughts that once operated in the shadows. The mood is urgent, charged, and courageous. A widespread refrain has begun circulating. If God reveals it, I will refuse it. Observers note that many individuals describe the experience as both sobering and freeing. Some report a chill in the air moments before the revelation. Others felt a heat in the chest, as if something within them was being exposed and expelled. Regardless of the sensation, the consensus remains. The shadows are being uncovered. The spiritual community is calling this a turning point in the day. What began as awakening progressed to a desperate cry for clarity and has now erupted into a cleansing light that is shining into the corners of the soul. Leaders warn this phase is not for the faint-hearted, but for those ready to see truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Despite the intensity, there is an unmistakable sense of empowerment swelling among the people. With each revelation, confidence rises. What once manipulated from the dark now loses power under the weight of truth. The formerly unseen dangers of the day are no longer lurking. They are identified, confronted, and dismantled. As midday approaches, the reports all agree. The Holy Spirit's light is sweeping across hearts and homes with surgical precision. The shadows are not just being noticed, they are being expelled. And in this dramatic third phase of the unfolding movement, one truth has become unmistakable. Clarity has awakened courage, and revelation has begun the real battle. Jerusalem, early afternoon bulletin. In the wake of the intense revelations that swept through communities this morning, a new wave of spiritual activity has been reported, this time marked not by exposure, but by empowerment. As shadows were unveiled in Chapter 3, witnesses now describe a sudden shift toward divine reinforcement, as though the Holy Spirit is clothing believers with a new level of spiritual perception. Field reporters stationed near multiple prayer centers say the atmosphere shifted from confrontation to equipping. Those who earlier trembled under the weight of revelation now stand steadier, reporting a sensation like armor being placed on the soul. One witness described it as an invisible strengthening that settled over them without warning. Spiritual analysts confirm that such transitions often occur when individuals move from revelation into readiness. Once the unseen forces are exposed, the Spirit does not leave believers vulnerable. He prepares them for the battles ahead. Observers noted many individuals lifting their heads with new resolve, as though a divine hand had touched their senses. Across several regions, people began testifying that they could sense things differently. Some report sharper intuition, others a sudden clarity of thought, and many describe a heightened awareness of spiritual movement around them. "It was as if my eyes opened twice," one participant said, referencing both the exposure shadows and the sudden empowerment that followed. Correspondents note that this phenomenon has created a unified shift in behavior. Individuals who began the day weary or unaware now walk with confidence, alert, vigilant, spiritually armed. The phrase, "I can feel the Holy Spirit sharpening me," has begun circulating as the unofficial headline of the afternoon. Reports also indicate that pressure points, places where people once felt confused or overwhelmed, now seem clearer. One prayer leader stated, "Where there was fog, there's focus. Where there was fear, there's firmness." Analysts point to this as evidence of what they're calling the armor of perception, an internal fortification enabling believers to discern, resist, and respond. The empowerment has reached even those not actively engaged in prayer gatherings. Messages have flooded in from homes, workplaces, and public spaces, with individuals describing sudden insights hitting them mid-task. Some report hearing a quiet inner warning. Others describe an overwhelming sense of peace that settled abruptly, guiding their next steps. Notably, spiritual observers warn that this level of perception is not merely for protection, but for strategy. The armor being reported is enabling people to anticipate spiritual pitfalls before they appear, identify false opportunities, and choose paths aligned with divine wisdom. The atmosphere feels less reactive, more intentional, almost as if the people have moved from defense to offense. Despite the intensity of the experience, the tone has shifted toward triumph. Witnesses describe a sacred confidence rising within them, not rooted in their own strength but in the Spirit's active guidance. "I feel ready," said one participant, emotion visible on their face. Not just awake, not just aware, but equipped. As the day progresses into its next phase, analysts agree that this chapter marks a decisive turning point. The Holy Spirit has not only awakened and revealed, he has armed. And with the supernatural armor perception settling upon the people, the unfolding story is only gaining momentum, setting the stage for the next dramatic movement of the day. Jerusalem, late afternoon update. Following the widespread reports of believers receiving what many are calling the armor of perception, a new development has emerged, one that shifts the spotlight from the external battle to the internal storm. Observers are now documenting a powerful move of the Holy Spirit that is stabilizing emotions and replacing impulsive reactions with divine wisdom. Correspondents embedded in multiple prayer gatherings report that shortly after believers felt spiritually equipped, they began encountering unexpected waves of emotion, fear, frustration, confusion, and even sudden discouragement. Analysts suggest these emotional surges were likely the remnants of earlier spiritual pressures reacting to the newfound strength of the people. However, the situation took a dramatic turn as individuals began to sense a calming force settle upon them. Witnesses describe it as a holy stillness, a stabilizing presence that quietly interrupted the emotional turbulence. One participant noted, "It was like the Holy Spirit reached into my chest and steadied my heartbeat." Reports indicate that as the stillness spread, many began receiving sudden insights, clear, strategic, and wise. Decisions that once seemed overwhelming became simple. Conversations that once caused anxiety now appeared manageable. A wave of divine perspective washed over situations that had previously felt emotionally tangled. Spiritual analysts describe this phase as a critical countermeasure to the earlier revelations and empowerment. While perception equips the senses, wisdom anchors the heart. Observers emphasize that without this grounding, heightened awareness could easily lead to emotional overload. But with it, believers now stand balanced, attentive yet unshaken. Messages from across the region reveal numerous testimonies of individuals avoiding impulsive reactions. Instead of responding out of fear or irritation, many report feeling guided to pause, listen, and respond from a deeper place. "It wasn't me," one witness confessed. "It was like the Holy Spirit put a filter between my feelings and my decisions." Correspondents note that a recurring theme has emerged: the difference between feeling something and following it. Believers are discovering that emotions, while real, are not always reliable, and wisdom, once invited, cuts through the noise like light through fog. One prayer leader called it the separation of spirit from soul in real time. As the movement spreads, those monitoring the situation describe an atmosphere that is both serene and strategic. Believers stand calmer, conversations carry weight, and decisions are made with unusual clarity. The earlier cry for discernment has now matured into a disciplined, spirit-guided posture. Observers predict that this shift will dramatically influence the remainder of the day's spiritual trajectory. With emotion stabilized and wisdom taking the lead, believers now move with intentionality rather than impulse. This is the hour of clear-headed faith. An analyst remarked, "The heart is quiet, and the spirit speaks loudly." As late afternoon settles over Jerusalem, one truth becomes increasingly evident. The Holy Spirit is not only revealing and equipping, he is refining. And with wisdom rising above emotion, the people are now stepping into day with a strength that cannot be shaken, setting the stage for the next dramatic chapter of this unfolding spiritual movement. Jerusalem, early evening bulletin. Following a remarkable shift where divine wisdom rose above emotional turbulence, new reports indicate that believers across the region are now moving into a heightened stage of vigilance. This phase, referred to by spiritual analysts as guarding the gates, is marked by a strong awareness of the mind, heart, and spiritual atmosphere, an urgent need to protect them. Correspondents stationed throughout the city note that once wisdom settled the earlier emotional storm, many believers suddenly sensed an invisible tightening around their spiritual borders. Witnesses describe a feeling akin to a watchtower being built within, alerting them to influences trying to slip past their newly refined discernment. Experts confirm that this transition is a natural response to the earlier movements of the day. Awakening brought awareness. Clarity exposed deception. Revelation dismantled shadows. And wisdom stabilized the soul. Now, the Holy Spirit appears to be shifting believers from inner strengthening to outer defense, commanding them to guard what has been gained. Reports from various prayer centers reveal that individuals began experiencing sudden inner alarms, subtle warnings about conversations, environments, messages, and even fleeting thoughts. One participant described it as a spiritual checkpoint, where everything entering the mind or heart must be inspected before being allowed through. Multiple witnesses confessed that they became aware of influences they previously ignored: negativity in conversations, manipulative tones, unnecessary drama, hidden temptations, or emotional baiting. These once familiar patterns now appeared threatening, as if attempting to breach fortified gates that had just been secured. Correspondents describe a rising seriousness among the people. Laughter grew quieter, conversations more intentional, and movements more deliberate. It was like everyone suddenly understood that guarding your peace is guarding your destiny, reported one observer, noting the striking collective shift toward spiritual caution. Field reporters also highlight testimonies from believers who, mid-sentence or mid-thought, felt prompted to pause and withdraw from potentially harmful interactions. Instead of rationalizing or brushing off inner warnings, they heeded them. "I felt the Holy Spirit telling me, 'Do not open that door,'" one witness shared with visible emotion. Spiritual analysts emphasize that this stage is not rooted in fear, but in fortified awareness. With sharpened discernment and stabilized wisdom, believers are now seeing how quickly the enemy attempts to reclaim lost ground. The gates, mind, heart, and atmosphere must be watched closely if the earlier breakthroughs are to be preserved. Reports also reveal an uptick in individuals declaring boundaries, internally and externally. Some limited access to draining relationships. Others silence internal voices of doubt or temptation. Many describe feeling a new backbone rising within them, one grounded in bold protection rather than passive acceptance. As early evening settles over Jerusalem, the tone across the region has become one of calm vigilance. There is no panic, no frantic movement, only focused alertness. With their gates guarded and their spirits fortified, believers now stand as watchmen over their inner world, fully aware that what they allow will shape the next battle of the day. Jerusalem, Nightfall Advisory. As the city transitions into the early hours of night, the spiritual atmosphere has undergone yet another dramatic shift. After a period of heightened vigilance known as guarding the gates, witnesses now describe an extraordinary wave of supernatural insight sweeping across the region. Analysts are calling this moment the most profound development yet. Correspondents stationed near several prayer hubs report that once believers fortified their spiritual gates, something remarkable occurred. Their steps, thoughts, and decisions became unusually precise. Individuals began moving through their environments with a sense of divine instinct, almost as if guided by an unseen map unfolding in real time. Eyewitnesses recount moments where individuals pause mid-conversation, suddenly sensing the true intention behind someone's words. Others changed their plans abruptly, later discovering they had avoided hidden dangers or unwise paths. One observer described it as a spiritual radar turning on, granting believers the ability to anticipate what they once stumbled into blindly. Spiritual analysts confirm that this level of insight does not arise from human intuition alone. They explain that after awakening, clarity, exposure, empowerment, emotional refinement, and vigilant guarding, believers reach a state where the Holy Spirit begins leading them proactively rather than reactively. Insight becomes not merely a response, but a way of walking. Reports pouring in from various sectors of the city describe people sensing timing in ways they never had before. Some felt prompted to wait when they normally would rush. Others felt urged to speak when they usually stayed silent. Decisions that were once guesswork now carried the weight of divine precision. It was like God whispered, and I just knew. One witness shared with awe. Correspondents emphasized the strongest development of the evening. Believers are reporting an extraordinary ability to distinguish between opportunities and traps. What once looked promising now reveals subtle signs of danger. What once seemed insignificant now shines with divine purpose. Doors are talking. A prayer leader said metaphorically. Some invite, some warn. The atmosphere across Jerusalem has become electric with expectancy. Witnesses describe people walking with unusual confidence, not arrogance, but assurance. Their movements are deliberate, their words measured, and their spirits unwavering. It is as though each step is placed on ground already surveyed by heaven. Reports also highlight a striking unity in experience. Whether individuals are at home, in gatherings, or traveling through the night streets, the same testimony repeats. I can sense the right way. This collective alignment has astonished analysts, who note that such synchronized spiritual sensitivity is rare on a large scale. Observers describe this phase as a divine partnership, believers not merely avoiding danger or resisting deception, but actively walking in the Holy Spirit's insight. The path before them feels illuminated, not fully revealed, but bright enough to know where to place their next step. This, one minister commented, is what it means to walk with God, not just behind Him. As night deepens, the city hums with spiritual anticipation. With supernatural insight now guiding their movements, believers step through the darkness with more clarity than they had in daylight. And as this dramatic chapter unfolds, analysts agree, this level of spirit-led vision is preparing the people for the final movement of the day. Jerusalem, late-night final report. As the city settles into its deepest hours of darkness, a profound calm has swept across the region, signaling the culmination of an extraordinary spiritual progression. Following the remarkable rise of supernatural insight earlier this evening, believers are now experiencing what eyewitnesses described as a divine sealing, an overwhelming blanket of power and peace resting upon the people. Correspondents stationed throughout Jerusalem report that this shift was not sudden, but descended gradually, like a soft and holy weight upon the atmosphere. Individuals who had been walking in spirit-led precision moments earlier felt a quiet strength settle inside them, as though the Holy Spirit Himself exhaled peace into their souls. Witnesses recount scenes of people pausing in place, overcome by a sense of both safety and authority. Some fell to their knees, others lifted their hands silently. A few simply closed their eyes as tears streamed down their faces. It felt like the day exhaled, one participant said, and the Spirit sealed everything that had been done. Spiritual analysts observing the movement say, the sealing marks a divine conclusion to the day's spiritual operations. Awakening clarity, exposure, Empowerment, wisdom, vigilance, and supernatural insight have all been woven together. And now, the Holy Spirit is locking these gains into the hearts of believers so nothing can be stolen, shaken, or undone. Reports indicate that this peace is unlike the calm that follows emotional relief. Instead, it carries a weighty authority, a holy assurance that the believer's spirits have been fortified. Witnesses describe it as power beneath stillness, a force both gentle and immovable. Many report feeling filled, covered, and completed all at once. Correspondents emphasize that the sealing is not merely emotional, but deeply spiritual. Individuals testified that internal battles that once raged have fallen silent. Doubts evaporated, anxieties lifted, confusion dissolved. It was like every loose end tied itself, one witness said, referring to the earlier struggles that marked the morning and afternoon hours. Experts on spiritual dynamics explain that this kind of divine peace is often a sign of spiritual victory, not the loud, triumphant kind, but the settled victory of someone who knows the war was fought and won throughout the day. The calm now resting over the region carries the unmistakable sense of heaven's approval and completion. Across homes, prayer rooms, and quiet streets, reporters observed believers resting with a confidence they did not possess at dawn. The early morning stirring had awakened them to unseen battles. Now the late night settling reassures them that the Holy Spirit has not only guided them, but sealed them in strength for days ahead. One of the most striking developments of the night is the unity of testimony, power and peace arriving together. Witnesses say it feels as though the Holy Spirit is both guarding and empowering them simultaneously, closing the day with divine protection, while imparting fresh strength for the new dawn that awaits. As midnight approaches, the final report remains clear. The day that began with awakening and urgency now ends with certainty and calm. Believers across the region rest under the Holy Spirit's covering, sealed, strengthened, and settled. And with the city silent beneath the stars, one truth echoes through Jerusalem. The Spirit who guided them through the battles of the day now gives them the peace that surpasses all understanding. Jerusalem, post-midnight special report. Just hours after the Holy Spirit's profound sealing of power and peace swept across the region, a new and unexpected development is emerging. Witnesses are reporting what analysts are calling the echo, a lingering, resonant wave of spiritual energy continuing to pulse through the night, intensifying rather than fading. Correspondents stationed in quiet neighborhoods and dimly lit prayer rooms report that many believers who settled into rest under the Holy Spirit's peace are now sensing subtle ripples of strength rising within them. It's like the peace didn't just settle, one witness explained. It planted something. Field reporters described testimonies of individuals awakening briefly from sleep, not in fear or confusion, but in sudden clarity. Some rose with fresh revelations. Others felt a renewed sense of mission. Analysts suggest that the Holy Spirit's sealing did not close the day. It birthed a continuation that is now unfolding in the depth of night. Spiritual experts monitoring the phenomenon explain that the echo represents divine reinforcement, a heavenly aftershock ensuring that the truths, wisdom, and discernment gained throughout the day settle deeply into the soul. One analyst remarked, "This is the Spirit pressing the victory deeper, making sure nothing slips away in the dark." Reports coming in from various regions highlight an unusual consistency. Believers testify to hearing gentle inner whispers, urging them not to forget the clarity they gained, the traps exposed, the strength received, and the guidance they walked in earlier. It felt like the Spirit was reminding me, "Hold on to what I gave you," one participant shared. Correspondents emphasize that these echoes carry not only reminder, but direction. Some individuals report receiving sudden insight about upcoming decisions or challenges they will face in days ahead. Others felt a stirring to intercede for someone unexpectedly, as if the Holy Spirit is already positioning them for future battles before dawn breaks. Analysts observing the pattern note that this phase is unusually dynamic for the late-night hours. Typically, spiritual movements settle as people rest, but tonight the activity is increasing. Witnesses describe the environment as holy but electrified, a stillness that contains an undercurrent of power waiting to unfold. Field reporters also confirm that some believers who had earlier felt exhausted now find renewed strength rising unexpectedly. One individual described waking with a surge of energy, saying, "I should have been tired, but instead I felt like something inside me was standing up." Observers interpret this as evidence that the Holy Spirit is not merely comforting, but commissioning. As the night deepens, a new conviction is spreading across the region. The day's spiritual journey was not just a cycle of awakening, refinement, and sealing, but preparation for something greater. The echo of the Spirit's triumph is stirring people with realization that what God began today is not ending at midnight. It is transitioning into a new phase. With Jerusalem resting under the weight of both peace and power, analysts conclude that Chapter 9 marks the emergence of continuing divine movement. The Spirit's victory over the battles of the day now reverberates through the night, whispering purpose, strengthening resolve, and preparing the people for the dawn that waits beyond the horizon. Jerusalem, pre-dawn breaking report. In the wake of the echo that resonated throughout the night, the city is now witnessing a breathtaking spiritual shift as the first hints of dawn creep across the horizon. Correspondents report that the atmosphere, already charged with lingering power, has begun to swell again, signaling what analysts are calling the dawn of commissioning. Field reporters stationed in multiple districts confirm that many believers, stirred repeatedly through the night by divine echoes, are now rising from their beds with a sense of purpose so sharp it borders on prophetic. "I didn't just wake up," one witness said. "I was summoned." Spiritual analysts observing the development explain that this stage is the natural culmination of the previous chapters. The awakening at dawn, the cry for clarity, the exposing of shadows, the armor of perception, the triumph of wisdom over emotion, the guarding of gates, the walk in supernatural insight, the sealing of power and peace, and the midnight echoes, all have been leading to this moment of divine assignment. Reports coming and describe a collective recognition sweeping across the region. The Holy Spirit is not merely empowering believers for survival, but commissioning them for impact. Individuals report feeling inner instructions forming, some subtle, others thunderous, directing them toward conversations, decisions, reconciliations, ministries, and missions they can no longer delay. Correspondents note that many believers rose before the sun fully broke, compelled by a force stronger than routine. Some felt drawn to prayer with renewed intensity. Others reached immediately for journals to capture sudden directives or visions impressed upon their hearts. A palpable urgency fills the air, not frantic, but purposeful. Witnesses describe the atmosphere as alive. Streets are quiet, yet spiritually vibrant. One on-site reporter remarked, "It feels as if heaven is leaning over the city, waiting for the people to step into what they were prepared for yesterday." Spiritual experts explain that this commissioning is tied directly to the discernment sharpened throughout the previous chapters. The people are no longer walking blindly. They see, perceive, and understand the spiritual terrain. Now, the Spirit is calling them to act, to build, to speak, to move in alignment with the clarity they fought to obtain. Reports indicate that fear, which once lingered at the edges of many hearts, has been replaced by resolution. Even those previously hesitant now feel courage rising like the sun itself, powered by the peace sealed over them earlier in the night. "I feel like I'm stepping into something bigger than myself," one participant confessed, voice trembling but strong. Correspondents also highlight early signs of unity forming among communities. Strangers greeted each other with knowing looks, as if sharing the same unseen instructions. Past divisions appear to be melting, replaced by a shared sense of divine purpose. Analysts call this a mobilization of the awaken, a movement of spiritually alert men and women stepping into divine roles. As the first golden rays touch the rooftops of Jerusalem, one truth becomes overwhelmingly clear. The spiritual story of the past 24 hours is not concluding. It is launching. The Holy Spirit, having awakened, refined, empowered, and sealed his people, is now commissioning them into the very day they were prepared to face. And as a new dawn rises, so do those who carry his discernment, stepping boldly into their divine assignments. Jerusalem, Sunrise Action Report. Moments after the dawn of commissioning swept across the region, a historic surge of movement is now unfolding. Witnesses report that believers, once awakened, refined, empowered, and commissioned, are stepping into the streets, workplaces, homes, and public spaces with confidence that seems almost supernatural. Analysts have officially named this next phase the March of the Spirit-led. Correspondents stationed across key intersections of the city describe a scene that feels less like ordinary morning commute and more like a mobilized spiritual force taking its first synchronized steps. Individuals move with purpose, eyes focused, spirits alert, as if each one carries a specific assignment whispered to them in the early hours. Field reporters recount witnessing people changing direction mid-step, pausing abruptly, or approaching unfamiliar faces with boldness, actions driven not by impulse but by unmistakable internal prompting. It was like watching a city guided by an unseen conductor, one correspondent said. Everyone sensed they had somewhere to be and someone to become. Spiritual analysts observing the movement explain that this is a fulfillment of the previous chapter's commissioning. The Holy Spirit is no longer just instructing. He is directing. Every step seems to unfold according to a divine choreography, built upon the discernment sharpened over the last cycle of spiritual transformation. Reports are emerging of unexpected conversations opening in marketplaces, workplaces, and quiet corners of the city. Believers, guided by supernatural insight, spoke precisely the words needed to uplift, warn, heal, or guide those they encountered. Witnesses say these moments felt too perfect to be coincidence, as if heaven timed. Correspondents highlight a significant development. Distractions that once derailed entire days now seem powerless. People move past temptations, emotional traps, and hidden snares with effortless clarity, as if spiritual landmines are glowing beneath their feet. One witness said, "I saw what I used to fall for and I walked right past it." Analysts point out that this level of discipline is not human. It is a result of spiritual preparation. The awakening sharpened senses. The exposure cleansed the spirit. The armor empowered perception. And the sealing granted peace. Now, the commissioning has activated purposeful action, and the Spirit is guiding every movement with precision. Reports also reveal an unusual unity forming across the city. Individuals who do not know each other are moving in the same Spirit-led rhythm, starting conversations at the same time, praying in the same spaces, lifting others without coordination. Observers say it feels as though one spirit is moving through many bodies, aligning them to a single divine intention. Witnesses describe the atmosphere as charged, alive with holy intensity, yet strangely peaceful. Even the air carries a sense of destiny. "It feels like we're not just starting our day," one participant whispered. "It feels like we're stepping into a story God has already written." As the sun climbs higher over Jerusalem, analysts conclude that Chapter 11 marks a transition from preparation to execution. The people who were awakened at dawn one day earlier are now marching in divine purpose, fully spirit-led, fully discerning, fully alive. And with every step, the unfolding spiritual story grows richer, deeper, and far more dramatic than anyone could predict it. Special bulletin update. The spirit-led movement that surged through the city this morning has reached a critical turning point. As believers march with divine purpose, witnesses now report an unexpected escalation, a resistance rising at the city's symbolic and spiritual gates. Analysts are calling this new development the confrontation at the gates, marking the most dramatic shift since the Dawn Awakening. Correspondents stationed near several major entry points into the city, both physical and metaphorical, describe a sudden heaviness settling over the atmosphere. Individuals who moments earlier walked with clear direction and powerful confidence now find themselves face-to-face with moments of intense pushback. It was like walking into an invisible wall. One participant reported, "The air changed." Field reporters confirmed that for the first time since the commissioning, the spirit-led momentum appears to be meeting direct opposition, not confusion, because discernment remains sharp, not fear, because peace still anchors them, but resistance, deliberate and targeted, as the adversary has finally recognized the threat of fully awakened people moving in unity. Spiritual analysts are quick to explain the situation. Whenever discernment strengthens and divine purpose gains traction, the boundaries of influence expand, and with expansion comes confrontation. What believers are encountering at these gates, they say, is not failure, but confirmation that they are exactly where they need to be. Witnesses describe these confrontations not as physical conflict, but internal assaults, sudden waves of doubt, unexpected discouragement, strangely timed distractions, and emotional turbulence attempting to reclaim territory that was previously surrendered. Analysts report these attacks as precision strikes, hitting precisely where progress had been made earlier. Correspondents emphasize that the most striking element of this development is the believer's response. Instead of collapsing under pressure Many have paused, stood their ground, and lifted silent prayers, choosing to anchor themselves in the discernment sharpened during prior chapters. Reports indicate that each prayer seems to weaken the resistance, creating small breakthroughs. One eyewitness described a moment where an entire group, halted by an overwhelming wave of spiritual pressure, suddenly united in spoken declaration. "It wasn't rehearsed," she said. "It just erupted. We spoke truth over the atmosphere, and the pressure cracked like glass." Analysts say this moment signals a strategic turning point. Reports coming in from multiple gates reveal a pattern. The resistance intensifies exactly where the greatest spiritual progress is about to be made. Some gates represent personal battles, others relational tensions, others opportunities, callings, or areas long held captive by fear. Believers are learning, in real time, that discernment is not only for seeing but for standing. Witnesses note that the atmosphere across Jerusalem now carries a dramatic tension, like a battlefield suspended in time. Yet beneath the intensity flows a quiet certainty. The Spirit-led army is not backing down. They have marched too far, seen too clearly, and been strengthened too deeply to retreat. As analysts deliver their final report of the hour, they conclude that Chapter 12 stands as a climactic moment in the unfolding narrative. The people who awaken at dawn, empowered to the Spirit's guidance, now face their first major showdown. And with every act of faith at the gates, the resistance weakens, the atmosphere shifts, and the promise of breakthrough draws closer.